Okay, we left off over here on page 18, or 38, sorry. It's like we're right back in high school, sneaking around, August commented, raising an eyebrow as though he wouldn't mind revisiting some of those activities they enjoyed doing together back then. Sneaking out here behind the barn into the vineyard with a blanket had been at the top of his list. Leela flinched internally, the way she always did, with when one of those buried memories worked its way up to the surface. We need to run this fake engagement like a business arrangement, which meant she couldn't dwell on their past together. He crossed his arms, looked skeptical. A business arrangement? Yes. She held up her chin, daring to stare right into August's eyes, letting her resolve take over. That means no reminiscing, no charming, no flirting. We will only focus on getting the job done. The man defied her with one-sided smirk. What if I do my best work when I'm flirting and charming? He was teasing her, but she refused to let her hard frown budge. Charm may work with some women you're used to interacting with. Lord knew the man probably made a living off of smoozing the wealthy. But I can assure you charm won't work with me or any of the other women in Silverado Lake for that matter. He'd been gone too long. This isn't Napa. People around here can see through a facade, so going to have to actually work for results. Okay, his grin fell. What do you have in mind? Let me do most of the talking, answering the questions. They didn't have time to go over all the details of their fake engagement relationship before dinner. That way we won't contradict each other again. If we treat this relationship too much like a business, your family isn't going to believe us. His voice dropped a note lower. They've seen us together before. He didn't need to go on. Theirs had been an intense relationship for two teenagers, deeper than most, which was why the new bore such damaging scars. She now bore such damaging scars. Leela shored up her emotions, cutting them off. Sorry, I don't have my glasses on. It's starting to show. They know we're both different people now. August's eyes met hers, but then his gaze quickly diverted to the vines behind them. I never got to tell you how sorry I was. She refused to let her expression change. It was hard to apologize when not talking to someone. I never explained. Don't worry about it, she interrupted. The line of conversation was exactly what they needed to avoid. No, listen. He raised his hand between them. I'm sorry I never came back. Things were hard for me after my dad died. And like I said, I don't want an explanation or an apology. She had to stop him. Stop this. She didn't want the subtle warmth curling through her at night at the sight of the concern in his eyes. She didn't want the feel of her heart fluttering in her chest. I don't want to talk about the past, and I certainly don't need an apology from you. All she had now, all she could carry forward, was the lesson he taught her a long time ago. She couldn't rely on him. She couldn't rely on anyone. She stared into the eyes from behind the safety of her walls. I'm not the same girl you left behind, and you best remember that. Chapter 5. August stepped out the door behind Leela and once again had the sensation of finding himself in a different time and place. That dining table at the edge of the terrace, that one that had been set for their family dinner, was where he and Layla had sat together for countless candlelight meals. Underneath the white globe lights that hung from the trellis strewn around the stone patio, they would talk and laugh and sneak kisses when no one else was looking. In the months before he left for college, he told her that although he might be going off to school, he would never leave her. He told her that he had never love anyone else, which happened to be the only promise that he did keep. When he'd set out here together, when he'd said those things to her, he had no idea how his future would change. That the very foundation of his life would be taken away from him. That everything would fall apart. Are you ready for this? Leela had paused to wait for him so they could walk together to the table. Her grandmother and grandfather were already seated, and a server started to pour their wine. Because you don't look ready. She nudged him lightly in the ribs. You look serious and worried. August smiled past the ache in his chest. I'm not worried, but this whole assignment had already started to feel different from the roles he played back in California. These were people he cared about once. These were people he spent a fair amount of his life with. These were the people who cared about him. They had known him far more than anyone else ever had. How was he supposed to pretend in front of them? Remember, I'll do most of the talking. Layla grabbed his hand and prodded him onward. Her grip was too tight and too desperate to be tender. Follow my lead and everything will be fine. There you are. Nana and Papa both stood as they approached the table. Pleasure to have you back at Valentino Bella's. Papa caught August's hand in a firm shake. Glad to be back. August leaned in to hug Nana next. Thank you for having me to dinner. Mom and Toby and Jane couldn't make it, I'm afraid. Nana waved off the apology. That's understandable with this being so last minute. She settled back into her chair. We'll simply have to plan another dinner as soon as it works with everyone's schedules. That would be nice. He focused on pulling a chair out for Leela so they wouldn't see the hesitation in his eyes. His hand grazed his pretend fiance's bare shoulder, skimming the edge of the tank top, and he wasn't sure if it was familiar citrus scent or being here where they'd shared so many intimate moments that had his equilibrium off. He remembered how Leela's eyes sparkled when she looked across the table into his, over the flickering candlelight, how the light had danced across her face while she smiled and held up her hand to admire the simple ring he'd given her as a promise. I'll wait, she told him. I would wait forever to be with you. He had never forgotten those words, how he had said them with such conviction. August sat next to Layla, his eyes on hers. How long had she waited for him to come back? He didn't know, and she might never tell him. We found a bottle of Semillon from our first harvest that we'd hidden away. Nana raised her glass. We were saving it for this special occasion. We always knew you would come back when you were ready. Papa held his glass in the air, and we couldn't be more thrilled for the two of you. Cheers to a long and happy future together. Cheers. Leela clinked her glass with her grandparents and nudged August again. With the way his thinking stalled out in her presence, she might have to nudge him over the next few months. Yes, cheers. He completed the ritual, fighting to hold on to his smile. Thank you both. You have always been so hospitable. Nana set down her glass and shook out her cloth napkin before draping it over her lap. We love this place, and we couldn't be happier. The two of you will build a life together here the same way we have. Lila looked around, obviously deflecting the statement. I thought Sam would join us. He texted to tell me that he has to make some preparations for harvest. Papa shook his head with a grunt. That boy lives and breathes wine. Or Leela's brother didn't want to sit across from August for a full evening. That was a definite possibility. According to Wes, Sam had it out for him since Layla hadn't heard from him a few months after the funeral. He lives and breathes wine, kind of like someone else I know, Nana murmured with a good-natured chuckle. That's our family curse, she told August, passing him the bread basket. All the Valentinos live and breathe their work. It's not a job for us, it's a passion. Following your passion is really the only way to live. It seemed like the right thing to say, but he wasn't speaking from experience. August sipped the delicate white wine, which happened to hold impressive crisp flavors considering how young their vines were. I'm glad you feel that way. Papa shared a long, adoring look with Nana because now that you're planning to get married, we want to give up our house for you two, since we spend so much of the year in Italy anyway. No, Leela blurted, settling down her glass so abruptly that wine sloshed onto the table. You don't need to give up your house. I'm fine in my cottage, and August is staying at the ranch for the next few months. Nana swirled a line of olive oil into her appetizer plate and zipped in the piece of fresh homemade bread August had always loved. That's silly. We're not old-fashioned as you might think. He doesn't have to stay at the ranch when you're engaged. You should be together. This time, Leela kicked him under the table. I do have to stay at the ranch, actually, he said quickly. I have to stay at the ranch because he snuck a quick, stalling look at Leela. My mom and Jane need help with... Damn, what would they need help with? With the barn, Leela finished. They're reciting it. She nodded the direction as though prompting him to agree. Right, the work on the barn. He eased out of breath and poured olive oil onto the plate before dipping his bread. That was as close. He'd like to stick to eating and let her do the talking like they agreed. Reciting a barn won't take more than a week. Nana insisted in using a pair of silver tongs to give them each a helping of the restaurant's heavy Italian salad. It was still the best he'd ever tasted. That salami, the mozzarella, the house-made Italian dressing. Just know the house is yours to have together as soon as we're ready. Well, we're not going to get married for a long time. Leela wasn't eating much. She simply stirred the lettuce around on her plate. A really long time, like a year. That's what people are doing these days. They're having year-long engagements because it takes so much time and effort to plan a wedding. That's ridiculous. Papa dabbed at his mouth with a napkin. There's no reason to wait a year when you're already waited so long to be together. He slipped his arm around his wife's shoulders, and the two of them looked into each other's eyes, sharing a smile that could only belong to people who had struck out for more than 50 years together. You don't want to waste one more minute. Nana kissed her husband's cheek. If these last several months have taught us anything, it's that life is too short to wait for what you truly deserve. August slid his gaze to Lila. A tear rolled down the curve of her cheek, and she stared at the patio as though she didn't know what to say. Seeing her sad at a loss for words made instinct take over. You're right. We don't want to waste one more minute. Leela peered at him with wide eyes, but he shot her a reassuring wink. He had this. We plan to savor every minute of our long engagement. He slipped his arm around her, but made sure not to bring her in too close. That's exactly why we don't want to rush down the aisle. That's why we don't want to move in together right now. He gave her shoulder a slight squeeze so she'd stop gaping at him like he'd grown an eyeball and smile. Instead, there was this best chance to buy some space. We want to take time to anticipate the wedding, to plan the ceremony and reception in a way that represents us and our journey. It was a relief to know he was still good with words, even when he was wading through so many reminders of the past. We want to spend time looking forward to the day that we'll stand in front of everyone and make that commitment. It's not something we're going to take lightly. Leela blinked a few times before finally bobbing her head in a stuttering nod. She said, and she murmured, exactly. Glad to hear it, son. Papa set down his fork, because I do have to admit, when Nana told me the news, I was more than a little shocked to hear that you were suddenly back after the way you left all those years ago. Papa. Layla's grandmother gave the man another curative look. Let's not ruin our evening with talk about the past. No, it's okay. August removed his arm from Layla's shoulder and sat straighter. The conversation had to happen eventually. If Lee wouldn't let him explain things to her or apologize when they were alone, he would definitely take the opportunity now. I don't mind answering for my mistakes, he told Papa, but felt no judgment from the man. All I want to know is, why didn't you come back? I don't want to talk about this, Leela murmured, slightly breathless. It's not important anymore. It was important, though. He couldn't expect to come back here to sit with these people who'd once been such a big part of his life and pretend he hadn't just disappeared. I'm not trying to be rude. Layla's grandfather had always been too soft-spoken to ever sound rude. I'm sure you two have talked about what happened, but Lay, the man looked tenderly at his granddaughter, you were devastated for years, so I think we have a right to know what happened too. Before answering the question, August took his time looking at the woman sitting next to him, his heart cracking in half. He hadn't meant to devastate her. Layla stared straight ahead, her cheeks flushed. You do have a right to know what happened. This might be his only chance to explain himself to her when the other people were around, when she couldn't interrupt him or stop him from telling her what he should have told her a long time ago. It wouldn't change anything now, and it didn't excuse his abrupt departure from her life, but at least she would know why. I was in a bad place after my father died. He spoke more to her than her grandparents. Of course you were. Nana reached across the table to pat his hand. It's unimaginable what you went through. It was a tough loss, Papa agreed, for all of us. Your father was one hell of a man. He was. August couldn't seem to hold his glass steady. He sipped the wine, tempted to change the subject or speak of the same meaningless words he used before when he talked about his grief in those days. I'm fine. I made it through. If those words were true, his hands wouldn't be shaking so hard now. He was the person I looked up to the most, and yet once August had left for school in California, he acted like his parents hadn't even existed. He'd been too busy partying and studying and enjoying his independence to use the phone much. If he only returned his father's call the night before he died, but there's been a big football game, he'd miss his last chance to tell his father he loved him. Leela and her grandparents waited patiently for him to continue. After I lost him, everything fell apart. This wasn't another script he was reading. It's some phony character. In fact, this might be the most honest he'd ever been with anyone in years. I didn't know who I was anymore, where I belonged. I only knew I couldn't come back here, not without him around. It was selfish. I know that. I regret walking away, but I wasn't thinking straight. In those days after the funeral, he became someone he didn't recognize, someone he didn't even like. Then I met Forrest, and he offered me a job. He helped me finish my degree. He gave me a place to belong when I didn't feel strong enough to create a place for myself. He stopped there, and that was enough. He couldn't tell them about the depression, about how long it had taken him to feel some sense of purpose and hope. He couldn't tell them he feared that he weren't careful and he could go back to that place again someday. I'm sorry, I know that's not enough, but that's all I can say. Leela still wouldn't look at him, but Nana dabbed at the corners of her eyes with a red-white checkered napkin. We understand, she assured him. It takes a while to work out the grief when you lose someone that you love so suddenly. The woman's sad gray eyes seemed to spotlight Leela. Before coming back, he never realized that Lee must have grieved for him too, for what she lost when he disappeared from her life. Helplessness gripped him. There was nothing he could do about that past now. It was too late. Okay, since that's out of the way, we should eat. Layla briskly dished August a helping of lasagna and took a much smaller one for herself. We don't want Nana's lasagna to get cold. Still the best lasagna in the world, even cold. Papa took 2 pieces for himself, seeming to honor his granddaughter's request to let the earlier line of conversation drop. I would agree with that. August tried to shake off the happiness of the past transgressions to bring, or the heaviness, of his past transgressions to bring levity back to the table. Leela clearly wasn't comfortable with his honesty, so he changed the subject, entertaining them all with anecdotes about his early days of learning how to tend the vines. You two should go walking in the vineyards before dessert, Nana said when their plates were cleaned and the conversation lulled, like you used to. Memories simmered again, brimming over. Back then, they hadn't done much walking in the vineyards. They'd been kissing and laughing and talking late into the night, and when they'd gotten older, more desire shivered through him. The moments were still vivid, almost like they had happened last week. I don't know about walking. Leela started to stack the plates. I'm pretty tired. Nonsense. Nana snatched the plates out of her hand. You're savoring every moment, remember? The sun had just set, and the love of your life is here. You two should go enjoying the evening. August caught his pretend fiancé's audible sigh, but Nana and Papa apparently missed it. Take an hour or two, her grandmother prodded. By the time you get back, the tiramisu should be set up perfectly. Sounds great. August pushed down his chair and offered his arm to Layla. She glared at him for a few seconds before taking it. Have a wonderful time, Nana called as they walked away. Luckily, Layla's grandmother couldn't see the tight frown on her granddaughter's face. They cleared the patio and stepped into the soft grass that grew between the vines. The low-sitting sun softened the sharpness in her eyes. That was a great performance at dinner, she said after a moment. It wasn't a performance. It was true, every word. He'd already decided he wouldn't lie more than necessary. Maybe his explanation hadn't been the whole truth, but it was as much of the truth as he could offer her. Layla stopped walking and faced him. Why did you come back here? Anger laced her words. I had to, he said simply. He wasn't standing here to bring her pain or stir up the past for either one of them. Forrest didn't give me a choice. This was supposed to have been an assignment like any other his employer had given him, but it wouldn't be. He already knew that. The outline of her dark eyes seemed even more distinct in the dusky light. And it had to be given you a choice. You wouldn't be here? I don't know. That was the most honest answer he could give her. He would have been tempted to come back if Forrest had offered him the option, but he might not have had he had the courage. There's a lot riding on this assignment for me, he admitted, but I want to help you too. If they could improve the operation and be profitable, he had been able to convince Forrest to let Layla manage the place. Maybe it was the guilt driving him. Maybe he was trying to make up for the past, or maybe his intentions had more to do with the desire she still stirred in him. Though he wanted to, he didn't dare move a step closer. This is what I do, Lee. I fix wineries that are broken. I make them profitable, and I can help you do that here. I know I can. He couldn't guarantee what he did would be enough for Forrest to leave her alone, but he would buy them as much time as he could. You don't have to trust me. He never expected to win her back, or trust back. He knew better. She'd been hurt enough by people she loved. Not long after they started dating, she told him how abandoned she felt by her parents, who were so busy traveling the world and doing their own thing that they had only bothered to visit her and Sam a few times a year, and that he'd gone and abandoned her too, returning to California right after his dad's funeral and ignoring her calls and texts for months afterward. Now Leland would never trust him, not when he wounded her so deeply. He looked directly into her eyes. I want this place to succeed. I want you to succeed, and that's the goal. For once, he wasn't as focused on the bottom line as Forrest was. Leela regarded him a few seconds, the low light shining in her eyes. I'm glad I don't have to trust you, because I can't, she finally said. Then she turned and walked away. August kept his eyes on her. She disappeared around the corner. He never got used to that, watching her walk away from him. He'd never get used to battling the rush of the longing he couldn't act on. If only things were different. If only he could give her a reason to stay. Chapter 6. August had never been a procrastinator, but ever since he'd arrived at the ranch a week ago, he found plenty of diversion to keep him away from the winery. This morning, his mother had asked him to turn out the trail horses to the pasture for the day, giving him yet another excuse to avoid the Valentinos. But now he stood outside the red barn. He found it difficult to go in. The building itself had gotten a facelift, and in the time he'd been gone, new siding, new windows, a new coat of paint, but it was still the same place he'd spent countless hours with his father tending to the horses, learning how to be a cowboy. See, this is why he hadn't made it home much. It made him too sentimental. Focusing on the past wasn't going to help him move into the future. Forrest had promised him, shaking off the memories. He pushed the door open and stepped inside the dim light, immediately struck by the familiar scent of hay and manure. That smell, more than anything else, reminded him of his father. They spent hours here mucking out the stables, joking around the whole time. He learned to tack up the groom and groom a horse, but more than that, he developed a love for animals. August walked down the line of stalls, looking over the new additions his mother had acquired over the years. All of them were beautiful and strong, but he wanted to find one in particular. There at the end of the line, Knievel had been his father's favorite horse and sidekick while August had been in high school, and the two of them had nearly been inseparable. He approached the stall and reached out his hand, beckoning the horse to have the half wall. "Hey, boy," he caught a glimpse of the old chestnut quarter horse earlier that week, and when he and Wes had tacked up their ride, but then Layla had shown up to the ranch, and he'd been too distracted to make it back to the stable since then. Knievel raised his head and his ears perked. "You remember me?" August continued to hold out his hand. "It's been a long time, too long." The horse now had arthritis hunched in his shoulders, and the gray whiskers sprouted at the end of his muzzle. A pang lodged itself against August's ribs. Knievel had been so strong once, robust and healthy, just like his father. According to his mom, that horse had taken his dad's death hard and never been the same. It seemed Knievel had become warrior people. "I can relate," August clicked his tongue, trying to lure the animal closer. "I still miss him too." The horse regarded him with his large pair of wise, watery eyes and then prodded forward a couple of steps, stopping just out of reach. "You need some oats, don't you?" August walked swiftly to the back of the tack room and dumped the treat into the bucket. Knievel had never been able to resist oats. He carted the bribe back to the horse's stall and held it over the gate. After a few suspicious sniffs in his direction, Knievel shuffled the rest of the way over and put his muzzle right into the bucket. "I thought so." Still holding the bucket with one hand, he managed to give the horse's withers a good pat. "See, people aren't all bad. Complicated and messy, maybe," which was why he avoided deeper relationships, too. And we're about to lose the phone, so we'll start back here on page 52 and hope to see you when we find out what's going on with Knievel, August, Layla, her grandparents. Are they going